Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Mr. Steve K. Bannon to the stage again. Thank you for joining with us today, Mr. Bannon.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So today marks the second anniversary of the new federal state of China. But the world today around us is still lies in turmoil, such as the Ukrainian war, the impending economic crisis, vaccination disasters, and you have been dedicated your life to speak against the dictatorship in the Chinese Communist Party. So where do you see the new federal state of China is headed?
The new federal state of China is very simple. It's the future of the Chinese people. All the catastrophes in the world today can go right back to Beijing. The pandemic, the phony vaccines, right? The famine throughout the world. The underwriting, remember, Russia would not be in Ukraine if Putin hadn't gone to Beijing for the phony genocide games and cut the deal beforehand. The Chinese Communist Party is underwriting and backing up Putin's destruction of the Ukrainian people as it prepares for a kinetic war in Taiwan. Every harm in the world today, the root of it is in Beijing, and that's why the new federal state is the most, it's got the greatest possibilities for taking down the CCP. It's one of the reasons that I'm so honored to be a co-founder and so focused on working with all the different groups, all the different fighter groups throughout the world to help take down the CCP.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. It's absolutely a powerful opening for everyone. As you know that we as supporters of the new federal state of China, we see a lot of your appearance with Mr. Guo over the past years. So what did you find within your journey with the new federal state of China and with the whistleblowers movement?
Here's what it is. Think about it. Look at what Miles has told the West since he's arrived. Look at the achievements of this organization since it's been formed. 2 years ago, we had no space, right? We did it off Miles' boat in the harbor as a symbol to the world. Last year, we had a great commemoration, but we had to do it in a space we had to rent. Now you're in a space that houses many of the companies that's vibrant going forward. You have digital currency. You have a digital platform that's more powerful and better than Twitter, right? You have a fashion company that has world-class fashion already. You have a news organization that's putting out news 24 hours a day. Look at the accomplishments in a year where you're under constant attack, and Miles is under constant attacks by the Chinese Communist Party. What organization in world history has accomplished more than the new federal state of China in 1 year? In 2 years? Who has done it? Nobody. That is why this organization is so powerful in the future. As long as we continue to fight, as long as we can focus on taking down the CCP, this is going to be one of the most powerful political and social organizations in the world.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Bannon, for your answers. Well, a lot of people have been aware that you and Mr. Miles Guo are the most two vocal persons to speak against the CCP in the world. And because of that, you two both have been relentlessly attacked by the Chinese Communist Party over the past years. So my question is, do you feel threatened being here with us?
I feel empowered being here with you. You set an example. The new China and the new Chinese are not just setting an example for poor Lao Beijing that's still enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party in mainland China. You've set an example to all the diaspora of the Chinese people throughout the world, but most importantly, you're showing the entire world the lie of the Chinese Communist Party. You're showing the lie that the Chinese people are not mature enough, are not reasonable enough, are not good enough to govern themselves. The accomplishments of the new federal state of China puts a lie to the central lie of the Chinese Communist Party, that China needs a totalitarian dictatorship to manage a chaotic people. Nothing could be farther from the truth. If you look at the new federal state and all the different farms and all the organizations and rule of law and everything, the fighters and the G News, G Fashion, Getter, Himalaya Coin, you look at everything that's been created, right, by a free Chinese people on their own. that puts a lie to the central lie of the enslavement of the Chinese people in Beijing. And no, I don't feel afraid being here. I feel empowered in being here. And I hope that the American people take the new federal state of China in the toughness and grit and determination and resolve of these young Chinese as an example of how they comport themselves and looking at a tyrannical, illegitimate regime that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. So I always feel empowered, and I think a lot of our supporters are. They feel empowered when they are surrounded by all of the supporters, and also, Mr. Jason Miller and you all together here, and at 3 Columbus Circle. So even if we said that we're not afraid because we say that we're going to take down the CCP, but do you think that currently the U.S. public has faith in taking down the CCP?
I think it's an awakening. Remember, before Miles came to the West, one of the most powerful things that Miles Guo ever did was make sure, and even in my own mind, you just don't say China and the Chinese people, it's the CCP.
Correct.
We have bifurcated in the last 5 years. One of the most important geopolitical events was actually designating that the CCP, remember, 99.9% of the American people don't realize that the CCP is a very small organization, although it controls all of China. They happen to think that 1.4 billion Chinese are all communists, part of the CCP. They don't realize it's a very small group of under 100 million, and in that group, only a couple thousand matter. They also didn't realize that they're the richest families, the factions are the richest families on earth that have stolen all the profits and all the wealth out of China for themselves. So that's an awakening of the American people. That's why every day we must continue to press. One thing on War Room, Miles's great song, Take Down the CCP, we played as our out music and our in music. That's become a huge hit for the American people. And now they start thinking, little kids sing it, people understand it's Take Down the CCP, that the CCP is not the legitimate government of the Chinese people. It is a transnational criminal organization that has brought on a virus throughout the world, these phony vaccines throughout the world. It's underwritten the Russian military engagement in the Ukraine. It's already locked down 400 million of its own people, again, with no explanation, starving people in Shanghai and Guangzhou and these other great cities throughout China, while it prepares to have a military takeover of Taiwan after already crushing one of the greatest cities in the world, Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. So now people can see it, but it's a process. That's why we have to continue every day to continue to put the word out about take down the CCP.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I am, always feel honored, and as supporters, we feel honored to hear such, insights from you. But when we talk about the Ukrainian war and we think about the impending economic crisis and all of the things that we hear today about the vaccination, disasters, where should the rest of the world respond to CCP threats in the upcoming years?
What I think we have to do is that constantly the way to get the world to respond is for the new federal state to take more of a role. I'm a huge believer, and I've talked to Miles about this, like for instance in America, that the young Chinese American citizens now have to get engaged in active politics. In New York City alone, the number of Chinese American citizens is huge. They can become a major political force. They already, throughout the country, throughout every country they're in, that the engagement in democratic politics, I think, is the next step. And it's to show the world that Chinese people can govern themselves and put a lie to that. So I think the new federal state, with everything that we're doing, the whistleblower movement, on the Rule of Law Society and Foundation, of all the work different fighters are doing in different companies, the next stage is actually more active political engagement in your home countries, to learn the basics of democracy, to learn the basics of political organizing, to learn the basics of debate and free speech. You have a platform like Getter, now's the time to use it. So I think the future here, when I look out and see what Miles calls a new China, new Chinese, I think it's incredibly empowering. I think it's empowering to the countries where the diaspora, the Chinese people, have been forced from their homeland to go to repatriate.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. And you have constantly mentioned Getter, our platform, and the opportunity that we have as citizens of the new federal state of China here to speak publicly against the Chinese Communist Party. And I know that you have profound experience in media and in your war room. So what advice that you could give to supporters of the new federal state of China?
Here's the number one thing I would do. If you go to Getter, what I see when I have people, friends or colleagues or people in politics or in culture or in Wall Street, when they join Getter, one of the first things they're surprised at is how many Chinese citizens, how many Chinese people come on and join and follow them and then start to comment in their feeds. The number one thing you can do right now is just follow a wide range of people. You know, what Jason Miller and the team at Getter have done is amazing. Whether it's Brazil, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, right, Japan, all over the world, Australia, you have actual people of like-minded tendencies, people that are sovereigntists, people that believe in free speech. What I would do is simply start to follow those guys and put comments in. You're going to find out, you learn so much, and also people are going to follow you back. You're going to build your followings. Every person on Getter, every Chinese on Getter right now should have 100,000 followers. The way to do that is to start to follow people throughout the world. You'll learn a lot, but you'll also teach a lot. Remember, everybody looks to you to teach us what new China and the new Chinese are. And that's why Getter's your platform to talk to the entire world. So I would say use it, put up more posts, attach more news, start to follow people, build your own followings, but not just that, spread the word out there about the Chinese Communist Party, the evils of the Chinese Communist Party, and the power and the decency and the goodness of the Chinese people. You do that, and it's Getter's an amazing platform. And Jason's done a fantastic job, and now it's time for all of us to go to work. And not just that, get all of your friends to sign up. Get all your colleagues to sign up. Get everybody at your businesses to sign up. Make this the most robust, not a toxic environment like Twitter, but a robust, healthy environment for free speech throughout the world.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. You talk a lot about, the engagement and what kind of actions that we should be delivered, in the future as supporters and as people who want to take down the CCP and spread out the influence. So if we are sending out all these messages, what core content or what specific method that we should use to make this message most powerful?
You see, here's the thing. I think what Getter provides is right now, Getter, Jason and the team have just come up with Vision, right? It was like a TikTok. That's for the younger people, for behind the scenes. You've got the ability they're going to have ability to direct messages. You directly talk to people, right, throughout the world. They're going to have the ability to attach all the news articles. You've got the platform provides right now, and it's growing every day with different things. They're going to have payment services and all that. Just start to use it. Remember, right now, think about it for a second. Only less than 1% of people in China know anything about Tiananmen Square. Why? The evil CCP doesn't want anybody to know about Tiananmen Square. Tiananmen Square is like Lexington or Concord to Americans. Our heroes at Lexington and Concord that day that took the first shots at the British Empire, although we don't know all their names, they're revered in America as the beginning of our revolution, even before the country was formed, a year before the Declaration of Independence, right? The Tiananmen Square is hero. Remember the Empress of Liberty, that powerful, powerful, powerful statue made by the patriots in Tiananmen Square to resemble the Statue of Liberty. The whole world needs to know that. And the way to know that is to continue to use your social media just to put out what you're doing every day. Remember, the work you're doing every day is the work of what a free people do. You're building companies, you're raising families, you're teaching your children about cultural values, you're adding to society. The lie of the Chinese Communist Party is that, the Chinese are too chaotic and too disorganized to govern themselves. We have to do it for them. Look at Hong Kong, look at Taiwan, look at the Chinese people in the diaspora in every nation on earth, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, France. Look at all of it. They're contributing members of society in a positive way. And that's what Getter gives that platform, to just give the message of your life every day. If you give that message, the Chinese Communist Party cannot withstand that. It puts to a lie the central thesis, and it kills their legitimacy every day. Remember, all Wan Xishan does right now is worry about the legitimacy of the CCP. He understands what Mao is doing. He understands what this platform is. He understands what these new companies mean. Just continue to pound your message every day of your decency, your hardworking nature, right? Your resolve, your good citizenship. Just let people just see your lives every day on Getter and a social media platform, and trust me, next year, Beijing.
Wow. How powerful. Thank you so much, Mr. Rand. And a lot of supporters are getting excited, as we engage more. So my next question goes, as we have kind of like increasing engagement and activities on social media and an appearance, more and more supporters and citizens from the new federal state of China, that they stand in front of the stage and they stand in front of the camera. They speak against why they want to take down the CCP, why they're choosing whistleblowers movement, and why they're believing the potential success of the new federal state of China. So what type of activities or engagement that we should be facing or getting prepared with the international community?
Look, I think we're very quickly going to go and start to get official recognition of the new federal state. When the new Congress takes over, it's going to be a top priority. But as importantly, use Getter, and particularly the live stream and the new vision, to push your message out there about your lives. That will make countries and organizations want to officially recognize the new federal state. The power of the Getter live stream. The power. Remember, I get interviewed by the world's news every week.
Right.
The single best show that I do on a weekly basis is the G News show from the UK group every Wednesday at about 12 noon to 1 o'clock. They ask every week. It's the best questions. It's the most reflective questions. This is the Chinese people, right? They've not been trained. They've taught themselves. It's the single best news show I do in the entire week, and I do them all, right? How did that happen? What we need is everybody in the new federal state ought to have a podcast. Everybody ought to be up on live. You ought to be on Vision. You ought to be talking about the issues you find important, in whatever country you're living in now, whether it's New Zealand, Japan, the United States, France, whatever it is. What you believe in the local politics, what you're working on, how you're raising your family. The strength is your lived experience. When people sit there and go, look at these Chinese, they're incredible. They add to our society, they add to our culture, they add to our nation. How can they sit there and say they can't be governed by themselves? Remember, 1.4 billion people in the oldest and arguably the greatest civilization on earth are enslaved. And the modern world just looks the other way. Whether it's the Olympics or Wall Street or the global woke corporations, they look the other way. At the biggest crime of the 21st century, which is still the underlying crime, the unfinished work of the great wars of the 20th century. Remember, 200 million people died and the Chinese people are still enslaved. How did that happen? Your daily work, your lived experience, and making sure the world sees that is the number one thing to take that down peacefully.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. I want to kind of like circle back a little bit because I think you mentioned the formal recognition of the new federal state of China. So my question is, a lot of supporters are having the same question with, altogether. What do you see of the future of formal recognition of the new federal state of China? And do you believe that the new federal state of China would receive that recognition before we actually take down the CCP?
Look, I hope that we take down the CCP within the next year, and it's within our grasp to do that. Don't think that they're strong, they're weak. They're weak because they're doing moves like locking down 400 million people. If they were strong, they would not do the lockdowns in China today, right? If they were strong, they would tell the world the reality of what's going on in China. If they were strong, they would not have a social credit score. If they were strong, they would not have slave labor camps. Everything they do is their weakness. Now, it's incumbent upon us. I think we can make tremendous inroads throughout the next year in trying to get formal recognition, but that's a group effort, right? And we should look at some NGOs, some maybe other organizations to try to get that. The pressure against those organizations by the CCP will be immense because remember, the first group that recognizes the new federal state will essentially begin the beginning of a fuse that will blow up on Beijing. So it's going to be tough, but I think it's doable. I think we've got to start to work. That being said, on the formal recognition, the more powerful element is making sure that people in those nations understand what the new federal state is and start putting pressure on their own organizations and government to say, hey, why are we recognizing these criminals in Beijing and why are we not recognizing these decent, hardworking people that are adding so much to our society, that are not criminals but our neighbors, that are not these people putting out deadly viruses throughout the world, but are hardworking co-workers with us? How can we support what's happening in Beijing when we see people marrying into our families, are starting to become involved in our schools and our churches, in our communities overall? So that's still the most important thing. From that, Organizations and countries are going to want to recognize the new federal state, and that's going to be a big effort of Miles and myself over the coming year.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much for such a powerful sharing with us. I think all of the supporters, and especially for those who currently live in mainland and they're using VPN to watch our, the whole entire broadcast today. Do you have any particular message that you want to, be delivered to them? I think a lot of people are up really late just to see tonight's broadcast.
Look, your struggle is the world's struggle. Remember, the world cannot free the United States right now. All of the problems in the United States, and we have many, if you go back, the source of that is still Beijing. The United States is not totally free until you're free. And now throughout the world, I can tell you, in world capitals, in parliaments throughout the world, in executive branches throughout the world, in cultural institutions, in news organizations, people are being forced to understand that you're in slavery and in bondage to a transnational criminal organization. So everything that you do, everything that's done outside of here is to support your freedom. At the end of the day, only the Chinese people, only Lao Beijing can bring about their freedom, right? People in the West, others can assist and help and be there and fight that fight, but only you can free yourself. And that day is not too far in the future. The central lies of the Chinese Communist Party. Your enslavement, your bondage is not acceptable in a modern society, and certainly not acceptable to the people of the world. So remember, there are people out there that understand your cause, that pray for you every day, and more importantly, even praying, work in your behalf every day to try to show God that we're on the side of the angels, which is the side of the Lao Beijing.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Bannon. It's truly an honor. I think a lot of people are having the same feeling, seeing us together and seeing all these worlds and projection of the future. A lot of people are getting excited, and more people are increasingly becoming aware of our group and actually getting more participation and activities taking place here. So when you first met Mr. Mao School, were you aware that he is going to start viewing the new federal state of China with you?
Not when I first met, but I knew that Miles was a very special individual in that he was able to speak so directly about the plight of the Chinese people and had given up. I saw a guy who could, he had such wealth, he could go do anything he wanted in the world, and he dedicated his life. He dedicated his life to the Chinese people and to freeing the Chinese people. The most important thing in the many years I've known Miles, I spent 100 days on Miles' ship as we worked through last summer. And I have never seen an individual. I work very hard. I'm very proud of how hard I work. I come from a working class family that work was really the basics of the family values. Miles is the hardest working individual I've ever seen. He is working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that work is focused on freeing his fellow countrymen, Lao Beijing. I've never seen anything like it, and it inspires me. And so all the people that talk nonsense about Miles and Miles this, Miles that, I will tell you, show me anything that Miles has said to the West and to America that has warned us exactly what's going to happen and how dangerous the Chinese Communist Party is, and show me any person in the world, in any country of the world, that works harder for his fellow countrymen than Miles Guo. It doesn't exist, and I've seen them all, and I've met them all. And Miles Guo is the hardest working and just incredible. And I do want to take a little credit for making Miles Guo the great singer he is, but that's a story for another day.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon, and it's truly, feel honored and pleasure, to have this conversation. You talk a lot about your kind of like your experience staying with Mr. Mao School, and then you have said that a lot of things and a lot of the claims that you and Mr. Mao School made over the past 5 years are not controversial anymore today. So where do you see, the impending economic crisis, especially with the vaccination disaster, and also, truth about the CCP virus, and those things were very, very, very much popular on your war room as well. Where do you see the public, future when we're facing
I think there's, if you just look in the United States with the problems with inflation, the problems of trying to wring inflation out of there, but most importantly, nobody's paying attention to essentially the collapse of the Chinese economy. This doesn't make sense how they locked down and why they locked down 400 million people for as long as they did. And now they pretend like, oh, we didn't lock anybody down. Something is deeply wrong in China, right? And we know this. The economy is basically imploding. Unemployment with youth is out of control. They still have the massive problem with real estate. There's something deeply wrong at the core of the Chinese economy. And what that is that it's not really economy. It's really run by a gangster organization. Remember that gangster organization's number one priority is not helping the Chinese people. It's grabbing as much wealth as they can get and get it out of the country as quickly as possible and put it into real estate here in New York City and in West London, right? That's their number one objective, is to take the wealth and the hard work off the sweat of the brow of the Chinese people who work for slave wages and work in slave conditions. It's to take that wealth and to money launder it into the West for influence peddling, to take control of Wall Street, to influence giant corporations in these governments in the UK, in Europe, in Latin America, and in the United States. Okay? There's something deeply wrong with that economy. And the world's economy is not going to kick back in until we get to the roots of what happened in Wuhan, what's happened with this pandemic, what's the story of this virus, right? And then what's happened to the supply chains in China. I think that we're heading towards an economic catastrophe because the world will not hold, the elites in the world will not hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. The people in Davos, the World Economic Forum, the people in Brussels, in Washington, D.C., in New York, the City of London, will not hold a criminal organization accountable for what they've done to their own people and what they've done to the world. And I think we're heading to an economic catastrophe. But that catastrophe, I think may actually help, because I think it's going to wash away the Chinese Communist Party. Once the material nature of the atheistic, materialistic Chinese Communist Party implodes onto Lao Beijing, I think you'll see a change, and a big change coming in Beijing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, Mr. Guo also speaks a lot about the impending economic crisis, and I think that's a question that we all concern a lot. And especially, especially with the Lao Baixing you mentioned in China, that they are living under the criminal quarantine conducted by the Chinese Communist Party. So how do you project themselves in the future if they are not able to flee out from China? And how can you protect themselves and correspond to the CCP spreads?
I think it's got to be continue to do what we're doing here on the outside and using the VPN to get the word. Look, I would love to be able to wave a magic wand, and Miles would too, and think it's all going to be better. But this organization, the Chinese Communist Party as a criminal organization, is deeply embedded, right? And we'll have to see what happens. I think what we have to do is pray. We have to pray and work very hard, and remember, we have to support Lao Beijing. But I predict very dark days ahead for China. And the dark days are because it's run by a criminal organization that had no problem putting a bioweapon out into the world. Principally, which they didn't care about, was killing their own people and subjecting their own people to that. So I would like to say they're going to be bright days ahead, but I think we're going to go through many, many dark days before we get to the sunlit uplands.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. I think I feel, I always feel that we need to do more and more each day to support these supporters in China, and more each day to spread out the words for everyone, so that we can, we are the ones who can, kind of like giving out the ways to tell people how to protect themselves and then get prepared for the upcoming dark days. And this is also the message that Mr. Guo had delivered in 2017.
Yes.
Right? So every claims that you and Mr. Guo made over the past few years are not controversial anymore these days. So back to the one last question. We're running a little bit out of time.
Okay.
So do you see the foreign recognition, the sovereign recognition of the new federal state of China would be upcoming within, the near years?
I think it's an effort we have to undertake, but I don't want to mislead anybody. It's going to be very difficult, and here's why. The Chinese Communist Party is going to play smash mouth. Any organization in the world, any country in the world that tries to recognize the new federal state, that they will understand by doing that will be the beginning of the end for them. Mm-hmm. So the pressure against these organizations, the pressure against the people at new federal state trying to do it, the pressure against these countries is going to be enormous, but we must start that effort. And here's what I'm saying. If you look back 2 years ago, we started this on Miles' boat, right, in New York Harbor. If you look at last year, we were at the World Trade Center, right, with a rented space with a fantastic, and now you see here, in our own corporate headquarters with vibrant, great young Chinese building great companies. If you think we got a digital currency, there's a major social media platform that can compete with Twitter. There's a 24-hour news organization. There's a world-class fashion, and much, much more. There's all types of other companies that started and people working on. If you see that's accomplished essentially in a year, you sit there and go, this is incredible, right? Or the last 15 or 18 months is incredible. So nothing can stop us. The only thing that can stop us is ourselves. So if we keep working and keep working hard and make it a priority, good things are going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon, for joining us today. Nothing can stop us, folks. Take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP.